Winning Plays is brought to you by FanDuel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network.
New edition of the Winning Plays podcast is here. Chris Forsberg of NBC Sports Boston is here.
I'm ready to be angry.
And we have a series. Chris. 2-2, a dogfight of a battle between two teams, despite a 40-point differential per Sean Grandy. He pointed that out last night on Twitter here. And I don't know, Chris. I don't know. We're 12 hours out from that finish, but I'll throw it to you. Where do we start here?
Yeah, so I'm trying to digest it, and even I sat down to write this morning, and I'm like, all right, we're all angry with the execution on the final plays. Like, why does this bother me so much, right? Like, and all I keep going back to is two things as my lights go out on my little, for those of you watching on YouTube. So I think two things bother me is that, one, we've heard for 6 months how Joe Mazzulla doesn't want to call timeouts because he wants his team to learn how to thrive in high pressure moments. They suck in high pressure moments. And so, you know what? Maybe just start calling the timeouts and see what happens. Like Doc Rivers called a timeout, drew up a pretty good play, got them the go-ahead bucket, which shouldn't have happened. And so, maybe instead of pocketing these things, just go ahead and roll the dice and see what happens. I thought he was getting better at it as the year went on, maybe at least in terms of the runs. But when they limp into that set with 19 seconds to go, I was ready to launch my laptop. Like if stupid basketball mind me knows that's unacceptable, how does no one on that team catch themselves in that moment? And so for me, that's the other bigger picture here is the Celtics do not have any sense of urgency, whether it is with the final play of a game or the way they've treated this season. And so have we learned nothing from last year about complicating your path and adding extra minutes? And it doesn't sound like much. They're going to win this series. They're probably going to be in the NBA finals, but at some point I worry that it's going to catch up with them. And so I know I sound like a broken record at this point after losses, but it's just flabbergasting to me the way it continues to unfold. And especially with, it's your three key personnel, like your coach, Jason and Jaylen, that made the mistakes, and everyone else deserves some level of blame for it. But it's baffling that
it starts there
in that moment. Yeah,
it starts there last night. Those are three. No matter how you want to dice up the blame pie, like those three guys are getting the biggest chunks last night in Game 4. Yeah, let's start the timeout game.
Yeah, okay. So I was gonna say, I don't know if one thing made you more mad than another, but go for it.
It's the timeout. I'm with you in terms of the Jaylen mistake was clearly the more egregious mistake in terms of being
100%.
You're up to there's so many levels of being like you're up to one. Number two, that James Harden guy, he's been pretty good today. You probably don't want to
39 points.
You probably don't want to leave him. Who's been struggling down the stretch? Joel Embiid. Maybe 1 of 5 and the 2 of 6 in the fourth quarter and overtime. Like maybe you take your chances there in a 2K. That's the obvious. That's a low hanging fruit. Jaylen's off-ball defense has always been kind of a weak spot, I think, and that showed itself at the worst possible time on that front.
And how ironic in a series which his defense has been sort of championed as the thing that swung it, that his defense on Harden in the last play. It's
brutal because you're right. That was easily, this is his best defensive series of his career. This would have been like a trademark situation for him. Now, all anyone's going to remember from the series defensively for him, if depending on how the next two games go, is that mistake. And the other weird thing about that sequence that I wrote about on Mouse Hype today was them opening up that play out of the timeout with Smart on Embiid in that spot, which led to the Tatum switch. So they got the switch anyway. My thing was Horford had done an amazing job on Embiid in the fourth quarter. So what
I don't have an answer for you. I watched the play back and I kept trying to figure out what the Celtics were trying to accomplish with the switch. And I don't know how Al Horford doesn't end up as the defender in that situation. And I'm fine with Tatum. I'm probably fine with Smart, considering the way Embiid was struggling. You just can't. There was one thing they couldn't do. Or two things. They couldn't foul Embiid on an attempt, and they couldn't give up a three-pointer. And one of those two things happened.
And it's just one. I wonder with Jaylen's decision. You're if Horford's there, he probably doesn't come over. as far as he doesn't like, and that doesn't take Jaylen. Like Jaylen still takes the full blame here, but you're just like looking at it from a big picture.
Somewhat more defensible.
Somewhat more defensible, a little bit, yeah. But still, like Jaylen's wrong instincts there were like, all right, a smaller guy as Embiid, we have to throw a double here. That's what we've been doing all game, except when you're up 2 with 20 seconds left. You don't do that. Whatever.
And
that's not.
And credit to Embiid. That's a tough pass.
Yeah, tough pass.
Credit to Harden. Wasn't an easy catch and shoot. Like Jaylen still contested it good. And yet the fact that you allowed yourself to get to that position is what, like, so, okay. I don't know how much coaches have to, this isn't, youth basketball or high school basketball or whatever. I don't think the coach needs to sit in the huddle and be like, look, guys, there's one thing we can't do on this play. But do you think it's stress? Do you think it's like
but he does.
I'm not taking any chances. I'm like, all right, you idiots. You keep making these errors. So I'm just going to tell you, you might get mad at me for telling you this, but don't give up a 3-point shot. That's the only thing we can't do here. Even if they hit it, we'll tie. We'll have a chance to win it on a final possession, but just can't let them get ahead. And they did.
It's, again, when 40 minutes, 45 minutes, these guys are gassed. They're like, that maybe that stuff was even said to them on the bench period, and Jaylen just like forgot. Who knows? But yeah, that is like just basketball 101 stuff. With that said, the timeout situation bothers me more a day later. It's still a situation, and I'll tell you why. It's you. I mean, you laid it out perfectly in terms of like the tracker. This exact situation, Chris. I actually went back and looked. This has happened 4 times this year. 4 times, and I'm going to run through them quickly here.
Go for it.
To get your
hold on while I get something breakable.
Yeah. Let's start with a positive one when this happened. Celtics down 2 at Staples Center. I'm not going to call it the crypto in LA against Lakers. They're down 2. That mad comeback at the end of regulation there. Tatum turnaround baseline. They got the ball with 25 seconds. They're down 2. No timeout. Tatum took that jumper with 17 seconds left on the clock. Got right into it. Back to LeBron down. Got it up. Great. Perfect execution for your 9 to call timeout there. Couple next month. Down in Miami. Celtics get the ball back. Down 2. 20 or down. Yeah. Down 1. I'm sorry. 20 seconds left. Tatum dribbles the ball down to 5 seconds, makes that ill-advised cross-court pass when they got the double team coming. Celtics lose. Turnover, no shot, no nothing. Lose by 3. Same situation in Milwaukee. The night before the All-Star break. Everyone's out that night. They kind of, put in. Celtics down 2 with 25 seconds left at the end of overtime. No timeout call. Celtics again run the clock down to 3 seconds, have nothing going on. Grant Williams turnover, don't get a shot off. They lose again. And again, one more time, the following month against the Knicks at the end of regulation, they waste 10 seconds bringing the ball down the court. Joe Mazzulla calls him out there because they don't even know what play they're running.
Right.
And then they only get 1 shot off to get in bit. And the thing that bothers me about all these spots, Chris, you have 20 seconds, 25 seconds left on all this occasion. For you to get up 1 shot in all these situations is against like math. Like what do you want? You want more chances. This hasn't worked in the regular season. It didn't work. Obviously, you get in game 4. So I just don't know, and to your point, like they didn't learn their lesson. Like we know they're not good at this. Like, so at what point do we give in?
And here's the other thing. How many times this year have they taken just like the absolute worst possible shot with like 30 seconds on the clock because they're so hell-bent to get a 2-for-1? They're so crazily aware of the clock at the end of the first and third quarter. And yet, like we get to the fourth quarter and there is just no urgency. It's like they just completely lose their focus and their ability to know what to do in that moment. And it's not like it's a this year problem either. Like I feel like, this has been going on for a while. And so Joe, I understand Joe's philosophy completely. Like you're trying to empower your players. They haven't grasped that power and they don't know what to do in that moment yet. And so sometimes you just have to be the adult in the room and be like, you know what? I don't care. You're just going to sit you down. I'm going to draw something up. It might be the same play, but at least in that moment, you got to say, go quick. At least give yourself a chance for a putback. At least give yourself a chance to, if you go quick and you miss, you can still foul. 3-point game. You're still going to get another crack at a 3-pointer. The not getting a shot off and it not being the first time they get a shot off, which some of those I'd blissfully forgotten. or blocked from my memory. But yeah,
the 4 times they didn't get a shot off. They didn't get a shot off because there was a turnover or just after.
It's truly remarkable. I've run out of words. Like that was the one thing I kept coming back to this morning, and I didn't want to use it because it's the most hackneyed tactic in writing. But like insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. How are we at any point feeling like this is going to go better than it did to this point? They have not learned yet. And like, look, you can find instances where they didn't call timeout and it did go okay. What was it? Brooklyn game 1 last year. Tatum makes the layup.
That was off a missed shot, though. Totally different ball game too.
Yeah, right. And so my whole thing is, what are your potential excuses for not calling a timeout? You didn't want Philly to sub. Who the hell are they putting in that you're so scared of defensively? Right. Like, are they going to put McDaniels on the floor and all of a sudden now you're just no chance to run? Like, come on. So I don't know. I just do not understand the logic. And, for me, it comes down to, it's just, if this team, as amazingly talented as it is, has one fatal flaw, and I hope it's not fatal. I hope it's just, complicating matters. It's that in those situations, they just aren't themselves, and they've got to figure out how better to navigate those, because the fourth quarter was maybe some of their best basketball of the year, and it got all washed away with the dumbass plays in the final minute.
Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, because right now new customers can get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. You got to get the app. The app's the way to go. It is so easy to use. You get great promotions every day with the app. It's safe and secure, and you get paid instantly. How about that? Instant cash with the FanDuel app. There's no better place to bet all your playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/Boston and get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. 21 plus in select states. First online real money wager only. $10 deposit required. Refund issue is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino, LLC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG. Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, and Virginia. 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona. 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana. 1-800-522-4700 or visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts. Visit www.mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY at 467369 in New York. 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming or visit www.1800gambler.net in West Virginia. Now let's get back to the show.
And we should have done that for a second too, and for like up 5, like like just under 2 minutes left. And we had just not like a huge debacle, but few missed opportunities. I think one thing that's going to fly on the radar there, and I want to Marcus Smart had a good game overall, but the one-on-one 3 on PJ Tucker, up 3 in that spot with 120 left. That was the ultimate
he was going for the kill shot.
He was going for the kill shot, but that was a contested kill shot against the Sixers' best defender.
Right.
That's not Embiid, obviously. So that was a situation where I was okay, if we're gonna do that, why don't you give it the ball to one of your all-stars in that situation, who have weaker defenders on them. So that's one where, he he shouldn't get too much flack for because of he did other good stuff at the end of the game, and the end of shot regulation, like that 3, that's totally fine. Like that's again, like you don't want, if Smart's gonna be on the floor, you're gonna have to be comfortable taking that shot. And I mean, we can again do the argument being like, okay, well maybe you want to have like a better 3-point shooter on the corner, that's up, whatever. Like time is running off the clock. You got a clean look. That's all you can hope for in a tie game. That's best case scenario. But then between that and like getting Brogdon getting beaten a couple of times on the glass and PJ Tucker getting, it's like they should have wrapped that up in regulation.
And that's what I go back to. Or if Smart makes the final shot, like it's so funny how different the conversation is today. But ultimately, these are the playoffs. They come down to sort of those moments at the end. All these games feel like they're going to be close. Who executes better, who makes the good plays, and the Celtics just haven't done it. It is funny. Like I've seen a lot of people upset that Smart took 10 3-pointers. Like, haven't we learned by now if the other team is trying everything to take Jason and Jaylen out of the offense, like it's just going to be Marcus getting shots. And yeah, I want that proper balance too. They've certainly got to find ways for Jaylen to be more involved in the second half and fourth quarter and these moments, because it does feel like he's just sort of, off to the side and not getting. I'd probably rather see a Jason Jaylen pick and roll than a Tatum Derek White pick and roll. Mm-hmm. But again, they were so scattered in that moment. It's almost like if they'd had some form of or mechanism to stop play for a minute and come up with a better design. So yeah, it comes back on it. Like Joe's going to catch a whole lot of grief and he's going to be upset about it because we know how this works, and he'll probably get snippy with us after they win Game 5. But like, I just don't think it's unwarranted. And it was somewhat disappointing that while his 2 superstars owned it a little bit, I'm not sure he owned it as much as he could have. And hey, maybe that's just a pride thing. Maybe that's just a in the moment thing. It is hard after, 10 minutes after a game to go to the podium and admit that you did some missteps. I just think it's pretty obvious to all of us that could have been handled better. And, I'd love to know, like the players didn't throw each other under the bus. Al was very, went out of his way to make sure that to say the last play wasn't his an issue. He did seem a little bit more perturbed by Jaylen's double, but even, Smart came right out after that and said, I trust Jaylen to make a read there. They just made a better one. But yeah, I think in the moment you got to be frustrated. Well, like, how does this keep happening? And why can't they avoid it? Because just could have made your path so much. It's right there for them. Just laid out, and I keep saying it. I understand. I want to be clear here. Like the playoffs are not easy, but they are so much clearly better than the Sixers, especially with a somewhat hindered Embiid. And the fact that you've now allowed 2 crazy Harden games, foul trouble didn't help yesterday for Jaylen, but you've put yourself in a position now, best of 3. And do we know for sure like Embiid's not going to go for 52 in one of these?
You open the door for that now.
Yeah. And this is what I go back to. It's all about putting yourselves in the best position. And the Celtics, whether it's a late game or just the series in general, have really not done that well. And it's frustrating.
Yeah. And so that's, post-game commentary in the locker room, that is as good as you're going to hope to get out of there. Like you don't want, you want to keep positive after that, because if you don't, then who knows what you're going to look like after this one. But
it comes off so hollow.
It does. It really does, because that's, again, the manner between those 2 games and Game 5 against the Hawks, and it's just like
and I love Al, and Al was awesome.
Right.
Like, in typical writer fashion, I'm sitting there as we're talking to him, and everyone's got the hard stuff out of the way. What happened on the final shot? What happened on the switch? And on a normal night, you'd be like, hey, that dunk, the shimmy. But like, no one wants to hear about that.
No.
And I get it. They had a lot of good moments in that fourth quarter. They can feel like they dialed in a little bit to something with Embiid, but I want to get too happy about taking Embiid out for a quarter when he's still been super impactful, and the fact that he made the right play in a key situation and got that ball to Harden. So you just gotta be dialed in a little bit more. Like, just don't understand. I don't understand how a team can go through what they did last year and just not be laser focused in this moment, and falls back on all of them. Like I'm mad at everybody except Robb. Rob's always
Rob can do it around. All right,
but he could probably be more impactful. So
he was. Yeah, exactly. Everyone, like, there was the first half of the bench was gave a big old 0, Rob included there. But yeah, so let's look ahead to the rest of the series here. We like adjustment wise. I mean, Harden obviously back, like, he's gonna have one of those games every third game now. I guess that's the
Right.
trend in this series. So you
So
don't
that
want to
means
go
you're
to
only going to
game
have to deal
7.
with
Yeah, you gotta wrap
most
it
of
up
it
in
would be
6.
one game. Yeah. So that would be the worst time for it to happen, right? Um, I think foul trouble certainly conspired against Jaylen defending Harden in the first half there, and I think that allowed him to get going. So I
Yep.
think you stick with what works there. Like you just hope Al's still super motivated and can kind of tap into a little bit of what they did in the fourth against Embiid. To me, I don't know if that was much of an adjustment. I just felt like Al did the playoff Al thing where he gets really hyped and has a really good stretch. I mean, I haven't gone back and watched anything because the rest of the fourth quarter made me so mad. But was there anything you saw that you were like, oh, they're doing this a little bit differently, or something that jumped out?
No, I mean, I think the flow of the game. It's just you have to read in terms of like what's working against Embiid, and that in the spot like Embiid was getting smarter against the like smaller matchups and like getting in deeper in the first half. So I think the Celtics wisely went back to Horford as much more, and then Horford, brought his A game in that fourth quarter, and the team defensively, like, I mean, they only scored 24 points in that fourth. They they just went through their own little rut there at the beginning of it. Otherwise, they could have built an even bigger lead because the Sixers were kind of throwing up all over themselves. But it's interesting to see like adjustments wise from Philly, like McDaniel's out of the rotation, Paul Reed already down to 6 minutes in that game. So they're really tightening things up in terms of their
Yeah.
bench rotation. Um,
And felt
so
like Joe did the same. Like Grant only played 6 minutes or something
yeah,
like that. Didn't
you
play
got
a whole lot.
12, Robb 14.
Well, that's
Yeah, so
right.
those both, and that's fine because those guys, I mean, you're going to hopefully get more out of those guys at home regardless.
Yeah.
But yeah, not going to those guys in the game when the offense isn't flowing and they weren't bringing too much to the table for that night. Like, you get it. But you wonder now, like Brogdon defensively against Harden, he's had ups and downs there. I think that was a rough one to him. I think, you wonder how much you want to not hide Brogdon defensively, but if that's the guy they're going to pick on with Harden,
Yeah.
and that's going to be a thing to watch the rest of the series, I feel like.
And so they got to find the spots for him. So, and again, if they're playing Harden and Embiid big minutes, it's going to be hard to find those spots. But, especially in those moments, I don't feel like the Celtics bench. Brogdon had his moments, and obviously in game 3 where it really helped stretch that thing out and get the Celtics to that win. The bench has to be more impactful, especially as the series comes back to Boston. You got to win those late first quarter, early second quarter minutes. I didn't go back and look at it non-Embiid minutes, how those went. It felt like Celtics didn't make much hay, especially until the fourth quarter there.
No,
but man, you had that team on the heels. That building was quiet, and yeah, you just could never quite, hit the knockout. I was actually really impressed because it felt like they were just kind of getting stiff-armed all night. It feels like when that happens during the season, this team just never quite makes the run, or it does, but never gets over the 3-point hump. It was interesting to see them surge ahead, and it really felt like this was the series was over, and that the Celtics had sort of taken this thing and we're going to come home and finish it off. And now, just like you said, anything can happen in 3 games. You feel good that you have home court, but man, you got to play like it.
What's your confidence level?
I've been super confident in our series. I just think when you look at these teams, and maybe I'd feel differently if Embiid was completely healthy, but I mean, the Celtics are so much deeper. And maybe I guess that's not a huge thing in the playoffs because you're leaning on your stars, and their stars have. Is it fair to say their stars have been better because Harden has been way better than we probably thought?
Yep.
Like Jason and Jaylen have been fine and good. I don't know if Jaylen's defense has been awesome. But like Embiid's hindered and Harden is what he is, and yet they still had 76 points. So I just need the Celtics to be a little bit more dialed in, understand that they've put themselves in another compromising position, and show the urgency that they should have had in those moments. And just I don't know. I should we root for the game to come down to a moment where they can show they've learned, or do we root for them to actually just blow doors so that they don't have to go through that situation?
No, I think that's certainly we've had enough of those moments now. I think where the blowing doors is how this team gets
the
to the
path.
finals. Yeah, that's the path.
Before you go, I'll say this: the one thing that does give me confidence is that typically when there's been a moment like this, not only does the team respond, which we've seen the game 4 against the Hawks, game 6 against the Hawks, game 2 against the Sixers, they always sort of come back from these losses. But Joe is like a little more dialed in, and like he takes it as an affront to himself when that happens. This one, I think he can clearly take as like, okay, I messed that up. I need to be better. And I think he felt that a little bit after game 1 when he kind of tried to take ownership and say he didn't put his team in position to win. So I suspect he will not be sleeping much the next 48 hours, and we'll hopefully have this team a little bit more locked in for game 5.
Yeah, to your point, the resiliency has been there all year long with this team, which is certainly a plus. But
it shouldn't get to that point,
right? It's just the leaving the door open when it's like you have guys that can go nuts against you, and what if they do have a better team? There's just all sorts of areas. But at the same time, if the numbers are any indication of how things have gone, the rest of the series are any indication. The Celtics still in pole position there. They got back home court advantage in Philly. That was at the bare minimum what the goal needed to be around there. And now they have home court advantage for 2 or 3 against who knows what may be, at least on paper, is the best team remaining in the NBA right now. So
is there anyone else I can be mad at? I just feel like,
I mean,
at least he played Derek White. He did put Derek White in over.
Right. Like, what's not enough Derek White in the end of that game? Like, when did he come in? That was the beginning of overtime, right? Like,
well, I think he gets subbed in crunch time at one point. I remember thinking, okay, Joe's learned. He's putting him back in there and taking him Brogdon out so that they don't attack him defensively. And then I think Aga credited with a block, but White was right there and kind of got a play out in transition. I was like, all right, here we go. They're gonna take advantage here. Maybe that was overtime. It all blends together after I had notes. But again, when I launched my computer from the bottom of the Wells Fargo Center after that final sequence, I lost everything.
So here you go. So Derek White did not play for the final 9 minutes of the fourth quarter, but they were down 7 when he came out of the game.
How do we not learn?
I mean, I guess that it's one of those things.
On the other hand, it was some of their best basketball of the year. Right, so I'm not gonna sweat it too much.
Right, but for defense, you'd think going to him for defense at the very end of regulation over Brogdon probably would have helped. But again, that's a little bit of, I think, nitpicking given that that
Brogdon in the core lineup, which has been pretty bad this year, was really, really good in that fourth quarter. I haven't gone back and checked the numbers, but like I do think that was a positive that they played about as good of basketball as they played together. But yeah, I do find myself yearning for if there's one dude who tends to bring the basketball IQ and be in the right spots and do the right things, it's Derek White. And yet, same deal. My lasting image is, why is he the one setting the screen for Tatum in that instance? And well, beggars can't be choosers. At least it got him moving towards the rim. If he just moved a half second quicker, maybe we'd be.
Don't wait for
a cheerier podcast.
Don't wait for Tatum to call for it. Just go set it. Be like, hey, buddy,
go right.
Go. You see that clock? All right, Chris Forsberg, NBC Sports Boston. Check him out all week on the Celtics Talk podcast and on pre and post game live. We'll be back with you guys after pivotal game 5 on Wednesday here on the Winning Plays Pod. Thanks for listening, and look forward to talking to you guys then.
CLNS Media's Celtics coverage is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win.